Pleased to welcome Larry Hagner to the channel today.
I'm excited to be here, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And you're in St. Louis, Missouri.
I am, yeah, right in the. So if the United States was a body, we're right in the middle. We're in the heart. So
isn't that something, Larry? What was happening in your life that inspired you to start the Dad Edge?
So I can share this. The story is a little bit long, but I can make it pretty quick. But I think the decision to be a good dad actually started when I was 12, and I'll share with you why that is. The story, I came from a lot of chaos, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of craziness. When I share the story, a lot of people are like, "Wow, it's a pretty unique experience," but everybody's got unique experiences. I'm not special by any means, but so my mom and biological father were married in 1971. They were pretty young. I think they were like 21 years old when they got married. It was like a fast and furious relationship. And then they were married for about 4 years. They moved all over the place because my dad was in the military. And then I was born 4 years later in 1975. So I have no recollection of my dad whatsoever, because about 9 months after I was born, my dad left, and the divorce was really bad, really, really, really bitter. And I think my dad visited me. I think he kind of, he had visitation rights. I don't remember any of it. In fact, I just remember not having a dad. And right around 4 or 5 years old, preschool, kindergarten, I'm not sure what grade I was in, but that's kind of when the light bulb went off, and you start to have memories too. And I remember, dads coming to pick up my friends from school, like when I was in kindergarten or preschool, I'm not sure which one. So I was like, oh, I know what a dad is. My friends have dads, some dads wear suits, some dads wear jeans, that kind of thing. And I didn't have a dad, but I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything, because like I grew up, watching Looney Tunes cartoons where the stork would bring the baby, to the porch, right? So like, I thought babies just magically appear and moms find a dad eventually. Like that was like literally my interpretation of it. And so I was about 5 years old. My mom tells me one day, she's like, hey, I'm having a friend over for dinner tonight, and I really want you to meet him. I work with him, and I've gotten to know him over the past couple of months. He's a really special friend, and you're going to meet him tonight. And that was, I think, her awkward way of being like, I've been dating someone in the workplace, and it's time for you to awkwardly meet him, right? So that's how that goes down. And I remember, like, just in my mind, I was like, oh, like, this must be the dad, right? I didn't say it out loud. This must be the dad. And I'll never forget this guy walking in my house. I was really excited, to meet this guy. And he came in, and it was the first time I've ever seen a man enter my house that I remember that wasn't my grandfather on my mom's side. And because I was really tight with him. And this guy walks in, he's wearing a 3-piece suit, like a vest, suit, double Windsor tie, mustache, trench coat, briefcase. Like, he was a white collar data software engineer, and his name was Joe. And my mom introduces me to this guy, and I'm just like looking up at this guy in absolute awe. And as I shook his hand, the first words this dude heard out of my mouth was, "Are you going to be my dad?" And my mom, I think I'm aging myself a bit, but I think she kind of really took that as like the Jerry Maguire moment. Yeah. Where Renee Zellweger, sees little Ray hug Tom Cruise, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, like I gotta marry this guy." Yeah. And 6 months later, they're walking down the aisle and they're getting married. And like, my mom quit her job. He made enough money that she could stay home. And I was like over the moon. I was like, this is awesome. We got a family now. And it was great for like 1 year. I remember, like, they really got along well. It was super cool. And then the next 4 years were like absolute hell. And I would say every year after that first year, it just got worse and worse and worse. And as a kid, you don't know what's going on, but you just feel a ton of tension. And there was a lot of abuse. My dad adopted me. Like, I actually called him dad right from the get-go. That's why my last name is his legally. And but he drank a ton. And so did my mom. And there was a lot of abuse, a lot of physical abuse, a lot of emotional abuse. Cops were called to my house for domestic disturbances because him and my mom beating each other up, or him beating up on me. And I remember police officers in my living room trying to break up my mom and dad. And it was really weird. But, the funny thing was, at the time I was going through it, it happened so often that it just kind of became the norm. And plus, like, dads with heavy hands was the norm of my generation. I mean, you got the belt, but this guy was over the top. Like, he would, I got punched, I got pushed down, I got thrown, like stuff like that. And it just became an environment of absolute uncertainty and unpredictability. But it was like normal. And then when they got divorced when I was 10, I remember being relieved, but also being like really stressed about it. I was like, well, at least I'm not going to hear them fighting anymore. At least I'm not going to be beat up anymore. But like, I don't have a dad. All my friends have dads, you know, and it's kind of weird. And then at that time too, I learned about the birds and the bees. I was in like fifth grade, sixth grade. And I went to my mom one day and I was like connecting the dots. And I'm like, hey, like Joe came into my life at like, you know, 5, like, where's my dad? And she's like, and then she laid it on me. She's like, well, yeah, I've never really told you this because I didn't really think you'd understand, but I was actually married before Joe. I was married for 4 years and you actually have a dad out there that is your dad. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
I was like, what's his name? Like, what does he look like? Where does he live? And she's like, I don't know where he lives. His name's Larry Boyd. She showed me the wedding album. I'm looking at this wedding album. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this guy kind of like looks like me. I was like, what is he all about? And then fast forward 2 years later, my mom continued to date same type of guys, you know, like just toxic, you know, really abusive dudes, you know, drugs, alcohol, that kind of thing. I think my mom really kind of, for some reason, she attracted men that she wanted to fix, you know, and that was, I think, the catalyst to that. But you know, I say that about my mom, but you know, she was doing the best job I think she could at the time. Like there were really no resources, there was no stuff like that, like there is now, and she was just trying to figure it out. But 12 years old, this is a really weird story. So I knew my dad's full name, right? I knew what he looked like. I go up to the local YMCA at 12 years old with one of my best friends. We go up there to play basketball. And as the clerk behind the desk hands me my basketball, he looks over my shoulder and his eye catches a woman coming in. He's like, here comes Mrs. Boyd with the hockey payment. And I was like, Boyd. I was like, that's my dad's last name. And I go, who's coming in? And he's like, oh, just this lady. Her husband plays hockey up here all the time as on a rec league. And I was like, what's her husband's name? And he said, Larry. And I was like, wow, oh my God, dude, that's my dad's name. So I go over to my buddy and like, just as a 12-year-old, I don't remember how I said it, but I'm like, hey, like, I think this woman coming in is married to my dad. We're going to wait here for a second. And he's like, what? So the woman comes in, hands over the check. She's about to leave. I tap her on the shoulder and I'm like, hey, and she looks at me like I have two heads and she's like, can I help you? She's a very sweet woman, very loving. You know, she's like, can I help you? And I was like, yeah. I was like, what's your name? And she like looks at me even more odd. And she's like, Lisa's my name. Why? And I was like, what's your last name? And she's like, Boyd. And I go, are you married to a guy named Larry? And she's like, yes. And I was like, I think you're married to my dad. And boom, like she knew exactly who I was. She was like, oh my gosh. She's like, sweetheart, are you Larry? And I said, yeah, I am. And she goes, yes, sweetheart. She was so loving. And even though I'm sure she was blown away, she was like, sweetheart, yeah, I am married to your dad. I am. Yeah. She goes, would you like to talk to your dad? I was like, oh my gosh, like I would love to talk to my dad. She's like, follow me. Go around the corner. It's 1987. Drops a quarter in the payphone. She's like, hey, yeah, so I'm up here at the Y. I made the hockey payment. I just ran into your 12-year-old son. He would like to talk to you. And she, you know, small talk. And then all of a sudden she just hands the phone over. And I'm like, oh, and I hear this voice on the other end. I don't remember what we talked about. I just remember the sound and the tonality in his voice. And it was so like blown away, shocked, that kind of thing. And he was just asking me, it was just random questions. I don't remember what, but that phone call led to me going home and saying like, hey, this happened. I told my mom and I was like, can I meet him? And she was like, I think she was really disappointed in a way, scared and fearful. And she's like, yeah, sure. You have the right to meet your dad. So show up to meet him. I think it was the very next week. And then we had like this euphoric day. Like it was like we met for lunch. He took me out to an arcade. We talked. I was like, dude, I was over the freaking moon. I was like, and I immediately that first day I was calling him dad. I'll never even forget the first time, like I walked up to him and I just extended my hand, you know, to shake his hand. And he just grabbed me and hugged me. And he's like, oh my God, I've missed you so much. And I was like, so that turned into like a 5-month relationship where I saw him every week. I mean, he lived 3 miles from us. I had no idea. I don't know if my mom knew, but she kept it from me if she did.
Is this in St. Louis?
Yeah, it's in St. Louis.
Okay.
And, so he came to all my Little League games. Like he was there. Like I spent time with him and his family. I had a 2-year-old half brother. She was pregnant with their second son. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like my family. This is like my dad. And after like 5 months, I noticed there was like tension in our relationship and I couldn't figure out why. And I get the best way I can describe it now is like, think of a woman you've dated in the past. and she's not into you anymore, but she hasn't told you about it yet. She's kind of like pulling the fade away and kind of like regressing. And I called him up one day, and this is where kind of dad edge gets started at 12. And I remember exactly where I was sitting and what I was doing. I pick up the landline, I call him. I'm like, hey, like, is everything okay with us? Like, I just feel like something's not right. Like, I don't see you as much. You don't call as much. Like, something's wrong. Did I do something wrong? And I don't remember even what he said. I just remember that was the end of our relationship. And I think it was like, hey, it's me, it's not you. Like, this is too complicated. I can't do this. And I think my dad was trying to, form his own family. He was also a business owner. And I think he was just like, he's a 35-year-old dude. And he was just like, I don't know how to raise, this 12-year-old that just suddenly came into my life. And that was the exit of our relationship. And then for like the next several years, I mean, I fell into like a really big black hole, man. Like, just emotionally, like, you kind of get labeled as like this broken homeboy, and like your mom's doesn't know, you don't have a dad at home. Daddy left for the milk and never came back. And I kind of gave up a little bit. I overate, got, emotionally overate. I failed the 8th grade, man. And I had to do 8th grade twice, not because I wasn't smart enough, but just because I didn't care anymore. But that led to me going to high school, led to me going to college. My mom continued to date like these absolutely disastrous, insane men. And then she got married for the 3rd time when I was 18, but I was gone, and started college and got my college degree, met my college sweetheart, who is my wife now. I've known her for 30 years. We've been married for 23. And I'll fast forward the tape till I was 30. So we're married for 3 years. Had a great job in medical device sales. We're pregnant with our first son. He's due in like probably 4 or 5 months. And life was going great. And I'm in a Starbucks here in St. Louis, and I'm there for a business meeting. And one of the women who is on my sales team with me, she was also a very close friend of mine, and she was married. So her husband and her and me and my wife, Jess, would spend tons of time together, double dating and that kind of thing. So she knew this story. And so I'm sitting in that Starbucks, and I see this guy walk in, and he caught my eye, and I looked over, and I was like, oh my God, like, that's my dad. He just walked in. I hadn't seen him in 18 years, knew exactly who he was, hadn't changed much, just a little rounder, lost a little bit of hair, but same exact look. And dressed really nice and that kind of thing. Still a business owner, very successful one. And the woman I was with, my friend and coworker, she like looks at me, she's like, "Are you okay? Like, you look like you just seen a ghost." And I was like, "I think I have." I was like, "You're not going to believe this." I was like, "But my dad just walked in here." And she's like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well," and then her first question was, "Which one?" And I was like, my real dad, my bio dad. She's like, whoa. She was like, "The one you haven't seen since you were 12. And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Where is he?" And I pointed him out. He didn't see me. I saw him. And I don't even know if he'd recognize me or not. And she goes, "Oh my God." Like, she got really excited. She's like, "Oh my God, what are you going to do? What are you going to say?" And I was like, and I was pretty cold. I was like, "I'm not going to say anything to him." She's like, What? I was like, "That guy, man, he doesn't deserve my time. He didn't leave me once. He left me twice. I want nothing to do with him. Nothing." She's like, "You're going to let your dad walk out of here you haven't seen in 18 years? And I'm like, "Yeah, that's the plan." And so she just, without even saying a word, she got up from my table and went over and sat at his. And I was like, what is she doing? Like, what is about to happen? And then all of a sudden, before I knew it, we locked eyes. He stood up, came over, shook my hand. And he's like, "Hey, my gosh, can I sit down?" And I was like, "Sure." And he's like, he saw my wedding band. He's like, "Are you two married?" I was like, "No, we work together." I was like, "I've been married for 3 years." He goes, "Do you have kids?" And I was like, "Yeah, we're expecting our first son." And small talk happened. And then he's like, "Hey, we should get together." And I'm like, I just kind of looked at him, and this is before smartphones. It's 2005. And I remember like literally kind of like flicking my business card over across the table. And I was like, "Tell you what," I was kind of a smart ass about it. And I was like, "You want to get in contact, you can call me. I will not call you." Like, hard stop. And 4 days went by, and I was like, I knew it. He's not going to call. And then I get this email from him, this huge email, like just filled with humility and regret. And it was like, "I'm sorry, bad decisions. I'd really love to get to know you if you have me in your life in any way, shape, or form." And I was like, So we met for breakfast, and that breakfast turned into a 21-year relationship now, where he's still married to the same woman, has been for 45 years. I have 2 younger half brothers. My 4 boys, 20, 18, 12, and 10, no different. And they know him as grandma and grandpa, and we spend time with them. And But I'll fast forward to where Dad Edge really got started. So my oldest son was 6. So this is 6 years later. At the time, my second son was 4. And I made 3 promises to myself when I got married. One was, I'm going to be a good husband. I'm going to get married once. I'm going to be a good dad, and I'm never going to hit my kids because I know what that's like. And I broke all 3 of those promises. So I wasn't abusive by any means. And I never was disrespectful to my wife, but I certainly just wasn't there. I was just like half in, half out. In fact, if I'm being really honest, I was more like 70-30, like 30% in, 70% just floundering. Yeah. And Dad Edge got started because my 4-year-old, who's now 18, he just graduated from college, stepped out of line one night, and I reacted and I spanked him. And I spanked him so hard that he fell. And when he toppled over, and luckily he was okay, he fell on carpeted flooring, but like he fell at my hands, and it got worse. I went to go pick him up, and he rolled over and he saw me coming. I'm like, oh my gosh, and he saw my hands, and he literally just closed his eyes and shook and shuddered, like, please don't hurt me again. And I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? So in that little boy's face, not only did I see a frightened son of mine, but I also saw myself, because I was terrified of men because they were really heavy-handed with me. And I was like, what am I doing? And that night, after I put him to bed, I went down to my office. It just had just streaming tears coming down my face. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing in marriage. I have no idea what I'm doing in fatherhood. I started really asking myself different questions. What have I learned in this? I got a 4-year degree in sports medicine with a minor in nutrition. I can tell you everything you can know about the body and nutrition. I can also, I'm good at sales. I was doing martial arts for about 13 years. And I was like, what is the common denominator with those things? I was in an environment of learning. There was a curriculum, there was training, I had a mentor, I had a community. And I really looked at my life. I'm like, what have I invested in these areas? Fatherhood, marriage, communication, connection, patience even. Patience was the big one. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I just dove into self-development, and I started a Facebook page, and I never did it for traction. Social media in 2011 isn't what it is now. And I just started a page, and I just started basically sharing what I was learning and being really authentic with how I was an idiot and still am to this day. And that page got so much traction. I was like, why are these people following me? I'm a freaking moron. And then that turned into a blog. And then 2015, I was like, I'm done writing. I want to talk to people. And I started the podcast 11 years ago. And then in 2017, we started our Dad Edge Alliance community, that's where men do life with us on the daily. We have hundreds of guys there. And what I can tell you is I wrap here with this super long story. I apologize for going long.
No, you're doing great.
Fatherhood and marriage it's a skill. It's learned things. And what we try to do as men is we try to white knuckle it. And society will also tell us that you're weak, you're broken, you're less than. If you need help or if you ask for help, you're weak. And nothing is further from the truth. We can actually learn these things. And I've been learning and still learning. And every day, I would say several times a week, I sit behind this microphone talking to people way smarter than me. And I've gotten to learn those things.
Isn't that fantastic? That's a powerful story. It's a very powerful story. Thanks for sharing that, Larry. So is that kind of what, after spanking your son, is that kind of what led you to turn your personal experiences into this business of coaching men, of developing men, of mentoring men? You've written a few books, and you've got your podcasts, and you're far-reaching in what you do. But was that what happened that led you to turn this into this venture that you have today?
Yeah, this venture that I have today was never the goal. It really wasn't. This was like a therapeutic hobby when I started podcasting. And in 2015, I joined my first mastermind. The funny thing was it was $500 a month. And at the time I didn't have $500 a month. And I'll never forget my very first mentor. His name's Aaron Walker. And he's about 66 years old now, a little ahead of me in life, but just an amazing Christian, entrepreneur, businessman. And he retired at 27, selling his very first company and bought and sold 7 companies over his lifetime. Wow. So Aaron was a podcast guest, and then we spent some time together. And he's like, you should join our mastermind community. It was called Iron Sharpens Iron. I was like, what is that? And he's like, it's a group coaching environment. He's like, we have Christian businessmen in the group, and We talk all about marriage. We talk about parenting. We talk about business, health, and wealth. And all these things are so important to us that we get in our training. And I was like, that sounds like snake oil to me. That sounds ridiculous. I was like, how much is this? And he's like, it's $500 a month. And I was like, Aaron, I don't have $500. Like, no. And he looked at me, I'll never forget this. It was Skype at the time. This is before Zoom. And he looked at me, he goes, Larry, I'm going to leave you with something. Okay. He's like, you come and do life with us. You're going to give not only $500 a month, you're going to give an hour of your time per week at 10 a.m. on Monday morning with these other 9 men who've been in my group. He's like, but you're going to get a roadmap. You're going to get connection. You're going to get strategy in all these areas where quite frankly, you're still floundering. He's like, and there's a cost to that. He's like, and that's the cost. That's the rent you do. That's the dues. He's like, but there's also a cost to doing nothing. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I want you to fast forward your life a year from now. And if you don't learn these things, he's like, I think the dad edge could be like the one of the biggest things in the fatherhood space. He goes, but if you don't get direction in that, you don't get direction in your marriage and kids, what's the cost of that life? He's like, I want you to fast forward a year from now. What's the cost of that? And I was like, just dead silent. And he literally goes, call me back in 24 hours with your answer. And he hung up. And I'll never forget, I looked at the clock and it was right at like 10 a.m. that morning. And I just thought and I thought and I thought about what does that look like in a year? I think I called him back 11 minutes later and I said, I'm in. And even when I swiped my credit card, I was like, oh my God, like what did I just do? And I'll never forget that very first day I entered into that group. And I thought to myself, I'll stay a month and I'll try it. I stayed a year. And all the questions that I ever wanted to ask was in that safe space with those men. All the answers to every question I wanted was in that group. I could not believe the value that came out of that. And then I started Dad Edge Alliance a year later. And I was like, I wonder if I can do this for dads. Because it wasn't really for dads. It was for Christian businessmen. I was like, I wonder if I can do this for dads. So I called like 10 people that I knew. And I was like, hey, I'm starting this thing. It's a 3-month thing. This is what it's all about. Do you want to do it? And I got all yeses. And I was like, wow, okay, that was pretty easy. And then I didn't have high expectations because I felt like I was not a guru, which I still don't identify as a guru. But the traction that came out of those calls, my learning, the learning of the guys in there, it was so funny. After 3 months, the guys were like, I was like, all right, guys, that's the end of the program. And they're like, whoa, no, like we got to continue. I was like, I don't have anything to continue. Like there's nothing, there's nothing left. And 9 out of 10 of them were like, can we just do it again? I was like, the same thing? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, I guess. And then that turned into another 3 months. 8 out of 10 men stayed for a year. And I'm like, I wonder if there's something here. And then I opened up the whole thing to, like an evergreen and then like different content month after month. And that grew to 800 men. And we've helped over 6,000 guys over the past decade come in and out of our group. And I could not believe. And then in 2021, I left the most lucrative position in medical device sales. I was a national sales director.